Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Adu, coming to you from Accra, Ghana. It is truly officially the start of the raining season. I just returned from a trip abroad and came home to really torrential downpours. We have a lot of flooding, which are issues that we've talked about with certain guests about, what's going on and climate change, et cetera, et cetera. This is on the heels of African Unity Day. African Development Bank is doing their annual meeting here around it. And so it's a lot of conversation about climate and sustainability. And so I'll be really interested to hear what are some of the outputs of that and maybe have some guests come and talk about what is the climate story moving forward. Let's talk about funner things. I have a guest here with me who is a seriously dynamic diasporan. He is the managing director of Right to Dream Academy in Ghana. Born and raised in Ghana, at 16 he received a scholarship to attend boarding school in Canada, where he earned an IB diploma, that's an International Baccalaureate diploma. He later moved to the United States to attend university at Franklin and Marshall College in Pennsylvania. Passionate about education, he has been in various academic positions for the past 25 years. Prior to joining Right to Dream, he was the head of school at Charlotte Prep School in North Carolina. And he holds a master's degree in education leadership from the University of Pennsylvania and a certificate in school management and leadership from Harvard University. Mr. Eddie Mensah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Florence. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Okay, so let's get started. Let's jump right in. Where are you from? Where are you local? And what is your craft?
I am from Tema. That's the way I like to let people know I am from Tema, which is a city about 45 minutes away from Accra in Ghana.
Yep.
I am currently local in Ghana in a small village called Old Akrade, which is near Akosombo, in the eastern region of Ghana. So that's where I've been local for the last a year and a half, almost 2 years.
Nice. And tell us more about Tema, because I recently had another guest on that was from Tema. I live in Tema, so
you did mention that. So, well, I was actually born in a small village called Nyekrom before we moved to Tema. So I claim Tema as my hometown because that's where I got conscious, right? Yeah. And Tema is probably the best city I've ever lived in all across the world. Well, simply because of sometimes they talk about in your younger years a certain stamp that a feeling, the air, the smells have on you. And so I think it's in my bones in that way. So every time I return, it's a very clean city. It's very dynamic.
So which community?
Oh, I lived all over Tema.
Oh, wow.
I lived in Comte 7, where my aunt was. We lived in Comte 4, and then Comte 8 was another place. Then we lived, even before that, we lived in Tema Newtown, which is where my dad was in the Navy. So we lived in the Naval Barracks, which is in Tema Newtown, near the fishing harbor. Before I moved to Comte 4, and then 7, and then 8, and then back to 7.
Okay.
After my dad passed, we moved around quite a bit. But it was all in Tema.
Got it.
And Tema is Accra without all the stress.
I would agree. It's getting a little bit more congested, especially because we have the port, and the port is becoming much more prominent and dominant in the country. But I was in grad school. I did a research paper on Tema and the development, because I studied urban policy and economics, so I studied that development. So tell us a little bit more from that perspective in terms of the layout, some of the history, so you can share that with our guests.
If you looked at the map, and obviously it's well constructed. It was almost like a grid. The communities that were numbered, they actually have Ghanaian names.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's Maijo and Kotugon and all those other names that exist, but the numbers are the ones that kind of persisted. But it's a very well organized city in that way, and it's predictable. Almost, right? If you're driving around Tema, it's really predictable that you can, if you're on this road, there's come to 7 on your right, and then there'll be 4 next, and then there'll be 3 next. But also, in terms of amenities, so in the old way that it was constructed, and obviously it's expanded now, but but Community 1 was designed to be the center, almost like the downtown. So the market was there, the public library was there, all the public services were centrally located and allowed to allow folks to be able to access it easily. And it was right next to the port.
Right.
So again, anything from the harbor coming into Tama before it could be shipped to Accra. Really well constructed in that way, and also had a variety of structures in terms of accommodation. So you could have, some of the wealthier families who could afford the bigger houses, income to 6 and 10 and 11, but then also sort of low income areas, income to 1 and 4.
Right.
Specifically constructed in that way. And there's some middle class areas in 7 and 8.
Yes.
So allows very well planned. That's the word that comes to mind when you think of Tama. Very well planned. Yeah.
That was what I observed. That it was really about that, like spatially aligning the layout with industry.
Right, and exactly, and the industry on the other side, which makes commutes easier.
Exactly.
So if you're come to 7, you can cross right to the textile factory or the cocoa factory. Really, very well thought out. I thought that Kwame Nkrumah's imprint is all over. It's all over Tama.
Model area. So if you're ever in Ghana, come to Tama.
I'm trying to keep it a secret. I actually don't want people to come to Tama so it gets too crowded.
It's true.
Come and visit. Don't stay.
Yes, come and visit.
It's for us.
Okay, so you told me where you're from and where you're local. What is your craft? Let's get into the craft.
Oh, I've thought about this quite a bit. I think my craft is trying to see how I can bring a little bit more justice to the world through work with youth. And it's taken me a while to arrive at this, right? Because I've always thought of myself as a teacher. And
an educator.
I was an educator.
Sure.
I've done that. And, I was a classroom teacher for a long time.
Yeah.
I was in administration for a while. But the word justice keeps coming up in my work, in some of the work I've done with nonprofits in America, even the work we're doing right now on Right to Dream, which is, even as a kid, I had this sense that things had to be fair, right?
Yeah.
That my mom says that was my phrase. It's not fair. How can I make it fair? So the idea that folks who are willing to put in the effort and the work don't get their just rewards kind of bothers me a little bit. So the way that I do it is through my work with young people and kind of empower them to become agents of change in wherever the space they find themselves in.
That's awesome.
So I think that's kind of after over 40 years, I finally narrowed it down.
Right, exactly. Okay, so you started to mention a little bit about living other places and coming. So you have a very interesting story as to why the where.
Right.
So we're going to ask you, how did you come to be living, working, and playing where you currently live now after going abroad? And,
right. So we take the whole circuitous route from the very beginning.
Sure.
So I mentioned earlier, my dad passed when I was 12. I went to boarding school that fall. He passed in September. I went to boarding school in October in Ghana. And it was away from my family. It was about 4 or 5 hours away.
Which school?
Bishop Herman. It's in Kwando. It's in the Volta region.
Okay.
And I'm a Fanti.
Okay.
If you're Ghanaian, you understand
that's
that
a
kind
ways.
of right.
It's a ways in distance and a ways in culture.
Exactly. So I think right then I was beginning to kind of understand the benefits and the challenges of living in different spaces in which you're not the most comfortable, right? Where language around you is different from what you grew up with, and those kinds of things. So at 16, I got this scholarship that my headmaster nominated me for to go and apply. The United World Colleges are around the world. There's one there's about, I think, 16 now around the world. But at that time, there were 7. And I got selected for the one in Canada. So I was there for 2 years, did my IB. And then the usual thing is to go to university somewhere in North America. So I landed on Franklin and Marshall. And there's a whole story around how that happened. Because I'm a soccer fiend. So the brochure had a soccer field on it. And that's how.
You picked it.
That's how I ended up.
It sounds like a footballer.
Right. That's how I ended up there.
Yeah.
And then, after undergrad, I went into teaching against the wishes of my mother.
Okay, wait, stop. So did you play?
Oh yes,
football?
yes I did. I
Okay,
did. Yes,
okay.
I was on
So you're
varsity team.
student
I was on the varsity
athlete,
team for 4
did all of
years.
that,
Did
yeah.
all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Okay.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then I actually played a little professional after university.
Sure, okay.
So I played for the Delaware Wizards.
Oh, okay.
In
And
Delaware
that was
for a few years.
Was that when Major League was
Major
fairly
League
new?
was fairly new,
Yeah.
and we still had this dream that
Yes.
we would make it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, so
Yeah.
teaching, starting to do some grad school, playing professional soccer, trying to keep every dream alive.
Yeah.
And then you start to notice, well, maybe the soccer thing is not quite going to take off.
I know.
Because of your audience, I'm switching between soccer and football. But
Sure. Yes.
I don't want to lose my credentials with my people. So,
So you can
it's
just stick with football.
So after a while in playing football and coaching and teaching, I started to think about what I really wanted to do, because the teaching thing was supposed to be a pit stop. Right?
Okay.
My mom did not want me to become a teacher, even though my whole family, my father, my mother, my grandmother, were all teachers. So it's supposed to be a pit stop to figure out what I wanted to do next.
Okay.
And then 5 years in, I fell into this job with an organization called Stepping Stone Scholars. And it was a nonprofit. It was working with low-income students from different parts of Philadelphia, providing educational opportunities starting as young as 4th grade and taking them all the way through to college.
Oh, nice.
And 15 years into that, I thought, okay, this is really what I want to do, because
Sure.
it was fulfilling my intellect, it was fulfilling my soul, it was fulfilling my heart.
Sure.
Like, these were some of these students were at my wedding.
Oh, wow.
I mean, this is how close
Yeah.
I became, very intricately related to the program.
Sure.
So after, I think I did that for 17 years, and then I
real
started
career.
a real career,
Yeah.
and then I started to
Yeah.
burn out. I was feeling drained, and I thought, okay, I needed a change.
Yeah.
So I went back into the traditional brick and mortar schools. I was head of school in Charlotte for a few years.
So did they headhunt you, or how did you find from
Headhunt
Philly? From Philly to
From Philly to
North
Charlotte, I
Carolina.
searched.
Okay,
I
got it.
searched. Yeah,
Okay.
I was looking, and I'd played in Charlotte, during my
okay.
playing career.
Sure,
So I knew the
You're
city a little
familiar.
bit. I was very
Yeah.
familiar.
Nice
And
weather, nice enough weather.
Right, and the guy who hired me actually then recommended me for his job.
Oh,
So I
okay.
got hired as a head of middle school.
Okay.
And then when he moved on, he recommended me to be the head of school. So
Got it.
I didn't realize at the time he was kind of
Grooming
grooming his
you.
successor. Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I still doff my hat to Blair Fisher, wherever he is.
Okay.
Blair really kind of mentored me into that
school
role.
leadership.
Right, into
Yeah.
school leadership. All through of this, I'm still playing, I'm still coaching. I coach school teams, I coach club teams, and I keep an eye on the soccer scene because that's kind of like my passion, right?
Yeah.
I hear about this Right to Dream that's in Ghana because one of the graduates was nominated to be the National Soccer Player of the Year in America, and went to school with one of my students from Stepping Stone.
Okay.
And so Nate says to me, Mr. Mensah, did you know there's a football academy in Ghana called Right to Dream? Never heard of it. I look it up, and it's an hour from where my mother lives.
No brainer.
I have to go see this place.
Right.
And so I come to see the place. I meet Tom Vernon, the founder. We have a good conversation. We exchange information, and then we stay in touch.
Yeah.
So this was probably around 2012.
Okay, so a while ago.
Right.
So
But
early days
Early
for
days.
Right to
But
Dream.
exactly. I still come and visit when I'm in town.
Sure.
And I joke with Tom that eventually I'm going to move to Ghana. Like that's my plan, right? But I'm thinking like when I'm 60, when I'm
Okay,
when I'm
the
done,
end of career
end of career days,
You
right?
come and start a school.
something like that. And then he sends me a random text one day and says, "Hey, do you want to come and help me run Right to Dream Ghana?" Because Right to Dream was beginning to kind of spread its wings a little bit
Outside of
Ghana. There's
Yeah.
a club in Denmark.
So wait, did it start in Ghana?
Yes, it did. So it
okay.
started with Tom's. Used to be a scout for Manchester United and lived in Ghana. Moved to Ghana when he was like 19 or 20.
Right.
Started it in his backyard.
Sure.
And then it grew into this thing
Yeah.
now. So at first I thought it was joking. I was like,
Yeah, right.
But my wife and I had talked about this. My wife is Nigerian American, and we had talked about, moving to West Africa at some point in our careers. Like I said, maybe towards the end. Obviously, Ghana is much more.
You're livable.
You say it, so I don't get in trouble at all.
I love my Nigerian friends, and I actually like Abuja. I really do. I enjoy it. I was just, as I was getting ready, doing just some reading, and Nigeria is ranked as one of the least livable cities. It's actually the number one.
Right.
And this survey that I looked at.
Yeah.
And not Nigeria, Lagos.
Lagos, right.
Yeah. So, I mean, probably outside of Lagos is fine.
Right,
and again, no shade.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. You said it, so
no shade,
I want
but
to be able to go home.
everyone knows that Accra, and I hate to say that Accra is a very livable city.
Very livable city. Very livable city.
Yeah.
So my wife agrees with you, by the way. And so we had thought about it. And so when this opportunity to come home came up, it felt like, I would have to do it.
Yeah.
And the timing was not ideal. So my stepdaughter was in 8th grade at the time. Was about to go into 8th grade.
The
high school.
Right. Yeah.
So there was some sacrifice that we had to make. So I came the first year by myself, so that my wife and I could finish middle school.
Yeah.
And then we found a good school, and then they moved here last August.
Okay.
So that's how I landed back at home.
Okay.
I keep saying home, but a silly story about that is, recently I was going back to Philadelphia, and I heard myself saying I'm going home.
Yeah.
Right. And I've been fiercely declaring Ghana as home. And all of a sudden I was referring to Philadelphia as home too. So
I feel like any city that you find your soul is home. And your soul can be in so many places, and that's the beauty of like
That's a tweet right there. That's a tweet right there.
Yeah.
That's
so
really
welcome
true.
home and home.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm curious about the transition working at a prep school in Charlotte from the inner city in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the dynamics of that transition work-wise and how maybe that transition informs your running of Right to Dream.
Right. That's a really good question. So my mind shifts more to the similarities than the differences, but I think there's some stark differences in those two settings.
Yeah.
The first one is that there's a sense of desperation, might be too strong of a word, but when I was in Philadelphia, there was a sense of yearning for something better than our current circumstances from the students and their families, right? There was this sense that life doesn't have to be the way it is now, and if we really, we need to get to a different place.
Got it.
Whether it's physically, whether it's academically, whether it's financially. So there's that kind of striving, right? There's also the ability to do more with less, right? So resources are not quite where it needs to be, and you kind of get really creative in those spaces, right? Independent schools, relatively speaking, not like the one I was in Charlotte, relatively well endowed with resources and those kinds of things. Families are a little bit more thinking about how to maintain a certain lifestyle rather than get out of a certain space, right? So that those differences
stability.
Right.
Yeah.
We like the way things are. How do we make sure that they stay the same, right? Whether it's the school itself or whether it's our family.
And culturally.
Right. And culturally, I mean, there's, because it's America, there's always the economics and race always have some intersection, right?
Yes.
And so chances are, if it's a rich space, if it's a wealthy space, there are more white people. It's less diverse, right? And so, in Philadelphia, the students that I worked with were 95% African American students of color, where in Charlotte, I think our school had about 25% students of color.
Okay.
So again, that changes the dynamics of how you approach and how we live together, right? But what you would find is that if you're trying to cultivate students, families, to learn how to be the best versions of themselves, and then to learn how to live together, then those similarities are there.
Universal.
Whether you're in Philadelphia or in Charlotte or in Accra, right? So, in education, we always say kids are kids. Wherever you go, kids are kids. And so, in one setting, I may be helping a student deal with and I don't want to go really stark, but
Sure.
deal with trauma at home,
Right.
In an impoverished neighborhood. But in Charlotte, I might be helping a student deal with trauma at home in a different way, right?
Like divorce.
Divorce,
things, yeah.
right? Those
Yeah.
kinds of things. So, kids always have that kind of individual need for the love and attention and the nurturing that they need to progress. And so I've always found that if I'm careful enough to step back, I can see those common themes,
Yeah.
right? And not kind of prejudge
Yeah.
the spaces I'm in.
Yeah.
But I have to say, back to the original question, each space prepared me for the next one. Right. So the work we've done in Philadelphia really prepared me to work in independent schools, right? Make me more appreciative of resources that I have,
Yeah.
and really put things in perspective for me.
Sure.
There are certain standards that having a lot of resources can allow you to hold,
Yep.
that you can apply in other settings.
Yep.
And so those kinds of things have kind of set me up properly for manage that
bigger
kind of work.
organizations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. So I'm curious about the grooming of your team
Right.
to be able to do a lot of that work.
Right.
In terms of finding the people who can carry that out and
Yeah.
do that, particularly here
Yeah.
in Ghana,
Yeah.
aside potentially from and even amongst the football staff, but just how has that been?
Yeah. It's a really good question, and I'm trying to be careful not to. Because it's not necessarily the difficulties we face in finding the right talent, right? I find it's not necessarily in the lack of talent, but more in the circumstance, right? I've had friends and I complain about staff that are not holding the highest standards or cutting corners, and some of that at the root of that is where an economic situation right forces people to adopt this culture of get what I can when I can, as opposed to think long term. Let's build this thing so that we can all benefit from it.
Sure.
But I'd rather get the small that I can right now, because I'm not really thinking about tomorrow or the next week or the next week. And so we approach almost everything like that. Right? So when we're looking at building a situation where our students now can benefit 10 years from now, it's hard for a staff member who cannot envision next year to be envisioning 10 years from now for this 10-year-old. So that's where I think finding folks who are purposeful. So I'd write to them, we talk about purpose, right? Folks who are really purposeful in their thinking and their approach. Some of the technical skills are easier to teach, right? Helping with your lesson plans and designing, interactive lessons are easier to teach than helping with your mindset that sees students as beings of agency, and not kind of the way that we were raised, where you're kind of like your objects until you become an adult,
and all of a
suddenly.
Right.
And then suddenly you're supposed to be this,
with
fully formed,
these,
right. So, that mindset piece, if somebody's willing and open to a conversation around how we raise children and how we partner with them in a way that, in education we talk about the Sherpa method of teaching, which is a little different from the sage on the stage, right? The sage on the stage has all the knowledge and they stand up there and they give it to you and you absorb it, and later on you can regurgitate it back to us, right? But the internet is telling us that style of teaching is archaic. Right?
Exactly.
So the Sherpa is guiding you because they've kind of been there before, but you're still kind of making your way up this mountain, right? And at some point you need more help because you haven't done this before. So the Sherpa is really involved when the kids are younger. But as they start to, experience and go through this journey, then the Sherpa takes a little less involvement, and the climber takes more and can explore and take more responsibility. That's not the way we went to school. So how do we teach differently from the way we were taught? And that's the challenge. I think I've given a philosophical answer to your question.
No, you've hit it on the nose, because this is something that I'm in education, creating educational content, and the key challenge in success in the classroom, in schools, is the mindset of the educator. hands down. And so that's why I always ask that question.
Right.
So because it's up to the organizations like yours and mine that have to put weight on the organizations that train these people to really change that. And that's really where we're kind of ending up.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask you my Glocal Speak question.
Okay.
So we want to hear what you hear. So I ask you to share a word, a phrase, or saying that is an integral part of your Glocal vernacular. So something that you use, something that caught your attention, something like that.
Oh, so, well, can I cheat and answer more than one?
Yes. As many as you feel like you want to.
So my favorite phrase and I'm using that word, jokingly in Ghana is "it's normal."
Yes.
And that's used to explain away any kinds of inconveniences that you face. When people look at you like, okay, you're not from around here, are you? It's normal. It really bothers me on some occasions, and I find it very entertaining on some occasions. Because it's almost like a balm, right? It's like a soothing balm that we use.
It is.
It's normal.
Yeah.
It's hard though, but it's normal, right? And we just kind of, and the days that it bothers me is because I think it creates complacency.
Exactly. It's
it
an
doesn't,
excuse.
right? It's
for,
an excuse. It doesn't, encourage us to actually find solutions to the thing that we're facing because it's normal, right?
Exactly.
It's normal.
Yeah.
The other phrase that I've been using really heavily recently because of the work we do, Right to Dream, is every Monday we have assembly with the students, and we end assembly with "You are more than a footballer," because I think it is our duty as the Sherpas to help them see a bigger space than themselves, right? And so, at that age, our students range from 10 to 18, and it's football, and they eat and they drink and they sleep football,
day,
right? And we also know that in reality is that a football career, playing career, is finite, right?
Exactly.
You're not going to play much longer than 40 unless you're a superhuman or on steroids. But so you're more than a footballer says, can you explore other parts of yourself?
Sure.
I mean, we keep it as a mantra just so that it forces them when they're in the classroom to think about themselves as more than a footballer. When they're in their dormitories, they think of themselves as more than a footballer. To, again, think of themselves not only about their own space, but the space around them. How am I going to make a bigger impact in my community? If I'm more than a footballer,
then you must. Okay, I like those. That's a great dovetail into talking more about the Academy and your work there. First, I want you to describe the campus for us, and then describe like a typical day in the life at the Right to Dream Academy.
Oh, you see the smile on my face.
Yes, I see it.
Old Accra. We're right on the banks of the Volta Lake. So our campus is split into two. It's split by the Old Accra village. So on one side of the campus, dormitories and about 8 football pitches.
Wow.
4 full size, 4 smaller size.
Wow.
Greens. We have this recording tower that I love to just climb up to the top I can stand in and look at all the teams training. And then you pass through the village to the other side, to the riverside, and that's where the school campus is. So on the school campus, there's a girls' dormitory, and we have a girls' program as well. And then there are classrooms and a very nice dining hall space that we use. It's a multi-purpose space. All our assemblies are there, entertainment, movies, all of that. It's a really good central gathering place. And then the staff accommodation
on the perimeter,
on the perimeter along the riverside. A typical day for a student is school starts at 7:30. So by 7:15, most students are, the pastoral officers will get them to school, and they are in school from 7:30 to about 1:30, and then they have lunch from 1:30 to 2:30, and then they have about an hour of free time, and then football training starts around 3:45, 4 o'clock to about 6.
Got it.
And then there's dinner. And then after dinner, it varies from day to day. There might be some enrichment activities. We have religious activities on the weekend for those who worship, whether it's an imam that comes or a Christian pastor that comes, or those of no faith have their own hangout. But it's rinse, wash, and repeat, right?
That's the daily life.
It's the daily life because on the football side, you need that repetition and
Yes.
that practice over and
Yes.
over and over to get better.
Yes.
My day, I like because I get to see all of this in action,
Sure.
right? So I'm obviously making sure that the school side is operating well and the football coaches are doing what they're supposed to do, but I get to hang out. And,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
On a really
yeah.
good day, I get to really kind of
And connect.
and see how the different sides. One of my favorite things I say to the teachers and the coaches that they're so similar they don't even realize it, right? Because we actually
yeah.
have a teaching staff and
Yeah.
then we have a coaching staff.
Right.
And I think sometimes they see themselves as separate.
Sure. Right.
Even though they're practicing the same craft
Exactly.
of instruction
Yeah.
and guidance.
Guidance. Mhm.
Right. So I love to just kind of walk around classrooms and then go watch coach and then hear the similar
Yeah.
conversation and the similar
Yeah.
tone. So
Yeah.
it's good. It's
Nice.
good. I'm leaving out the stressful parts, right?
Sure, yeah. We don't want to hear that. We just want to hear the good stuff. We want to hear the happy, make us smile. But
Exactly.
we obviously get it,
Yeah.
and so I think you came into the organization at a very interesting time
Yeah.
because part of the stresses that organizations like yours deal with. It's fundraising, right? I mean, it's always been a not-for-profit. So tell us a little bit more about how the organization is funded and how you provide your services.
Right. Excellent. All right. So, as a nonprofit, about 6 years ago, the founder got some investors together to purchase a team in Denmark called FCN.
Okay.
And part of the strategy was that because if we make any profits from player movements,
Yeah.
it comes back into
The academy.
the academy. And so a successful team in Denmark would really support that. So our players, our best players who go to Denmark,
Yeah.
they'll get transferred between FCN
Sure.
and some other teams.
Sure.
The income would come, it will trickle back down to. But those who run football clubs will tell you that if your entire budget is dependent on player
transfers,
interest, you're in
you
a
get stuck.
dicey situation,
Yeah.
right? It's unreliable. Player injuries, all kinds of
Exactly.
things. So most recently, the Mensah family from Egypt really got attracted to our model because besides the fact that we do football and we do school and we have this character education program that's really strong, you will see that our successes are not just on the football pitch. So we have students in America who graduated from prestigious universities who are doing things other than football, and the Mensahs were really attracted to that. So they have come in with a pretty hefty investment
Yeah.
to become sort of majority shareholders. And so we are building a new academy in Egypt.
Okay, exciting.
And very exciting.
Have you been yet?
Yes,
Oh,
it's amazing. It's
nice.
amazing. Really, really awesome.
Yeah.
And the staff there are wonderful people, and we've already had sort of interactions. So we're in a space where at least in the short term,
Yeah.
we don't have to worry so much about fundraising, right?
Okay.
What we need to do is continue to build on our successes
Yes.
so that
Right.
this investment does not become sort of we
Yeah.
can't count on a
Sure.
limitless
Sure.
piece of that. So the funding currently comes from the heavy investment by the Mensah family, and then hopefully down the line,
Right.
the player transfers, and then you start to think about other sources of revenue. Is it our branding and content and those kinds of things that can
The curriculum.
right? We've
Yeah.
been thinking about
Training, other academies.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Oh, you want to come? You can consult with us and help us with some of this stuff. So it's fascinating. That's the stressful part.
Yes.
That's the stressful part that I
Yes,
left out of the
exactly.
description. But you
Yeah.
need both sides of this, right?
Yes.
In order for the
Yes.
thing to function well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay, nice. So, speaking of the mindsets and the stress and all that stuff, how do you hack your minds? This is where I ask about what is your mindset hack. So how do you change the shape of your thoughts and
Right.
hack your mind?
Yeah. Again, it's evolved over time. I used to have, this sort of really rigid, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail type of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like you gotta have a really kind of structured approach. And then in the last 10 years, I kept saying, nothing ever goes according to plan. Like I have never had anything go exactly according to plan.
Okay.
But if I am open to possibilities, everything always works out. So I still plan.
Yeah.
Let's talk about we're sitting here right now, right?
Exactly.
I mean, if you review our exchanges, this is not where we're supposed to be.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
But if I'm open to possibilities, things work out. And so then I'm not entering it with disappointment, right? And so that's my mind hack. Is so I remind myself, it's probably not going to go according to your plan.
Right, but be
open and flexible to the possibilities. I used to think everything was an emergency, and then you start to realize, well, no, just if you delay judgment for a little bit and calmly look at it, it'll be fine. So, for some of that stuff, I think there's really no substitute for experience. Like, you have to go through that experience to learn from it.
Yeah.
But I am not as in charge as I think I am. Right? That's kind of the another side of that mind hack is like I'm planning, but I'm not fully in charge of this, which is kind of intuitive to some of the stuff that I read on social media. Like, take charge. You are your own agent. You are the author of your success and all of that. All of that is true.
Sure.
But I think there's a balance of that approach. So I remind myself that I'm planning because it's good to plan. But I also remind myself that it may not go according to plan.
Yeah.
And just be open to the possibilities. And allow the space and God, if you believe in God.
And the time to get to where you need to be. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit more about the ways of planning for the future. So Right to Dream is now expanding into Egypt. What are the plans for further expansion so far? And then also the name Right to Dream. You talked about justice, and I wanted to get a bit of more of a sense of like, what exactly is that? How is that embedded in the mission and the vision and moving things forward?
So our founder, Tom, and I, joke about this a lot, about how justice is my favorite word. And I'm suggesting to him that it might be his too. Because I think part of what he saw was this thing that he felt was not fair, right? And there are amazing football players in Ghana, similar to what he had seen in Europe, but they were not getting the same opportunities. And he felt like, they couldn't even dream about the kinds of successes that other children in other spaces can dream of. And so everybody has that right, right? Now, the work to achieve that dream is a different space, but at least the very source of it, in order to just start to think about it, you have to at least imagine it. And he felt like, and I think we all do, that every child should have that opportunity to at least imagine the possibilities. It doesn't necessarily mean that you'll achieve it, but that sense of possibility can be a real catalyst, right? Releasing. It's freedom, right. And so I think that's where that name came from. Our plans is to look for ways in which we make impact. So, in the nonprofit space, we talk about the high impact, low numbers, high numbers, low impact, those kinds of things. And we optimistically still believe that if we light, candles in different spaces, and we hopefully teach them about seeing the world as bigger than themselves, then maybe they'll light other candles, right? So we want our students to think of themselves of how they can make impact within their communities, because maybe Right to Dream cannot touch every community, but if we have Right to Dream students and graduates who are thinking about going back to their small town, their small village, and empowering somebody else to think about a life that's a little better than what they currently have, then we're kind of succeeding. We don't really think that we have the monopoly on the wisdom around this, but we feel like we're challenging and rocking the boat enough that maybe other people can copy us or perfect even better what we do. So I think we're modest in our thinking, but really ambitious in the plan. So Egypt is next, and I think, in 10 years, if you and I are sitting here, we'll be talking about a Right to Dream in every continent. That would be the kind of
the kind of growth.
Exactly.
I often hear, like, just my friends who've been in the football space about, the experience in an academy and the disappointments with moving, like not moving forward or moving forward. So tell us a little bit more about your graduates. The program has been around for a while, about your graduates, and then those that don't make it into a major thing. So, or a major team or something like that. So how does that interplay, and what kind of support do you see in alumni relations?
Excellent question. So I think Right to Dream has evolved a lot in its original thinking in the way that we handle graduates. Because the reality of the football industry, that it's a pyramid in which you start at the bottom with a bunch of players, and by the time you get to the top, only a few are left. You can go to these famous academies around the world, and they'll show you all the ones that dropped out. So Right to Dream's commitment is to try and find opportunities for our students. We don't drop students. We don't drop players, at 13 or 14 because you can no longer cut it. Our commitment is we're with you until you become an adult, until you're 18. So whether it's through the football pathway, if you're talented enough to find a major football team, we support that. Obviously, it's really good for us on the business side, right? But we're also having our partnerships with other smaller teams that some of our lesser talented players can still make it there. And then we have the academic pathway. And so those who are academically inclined and think about taking the student athlete pathway, America is a great destination for that. So we have quite a few that will end up in boarding schools in New England or go to university. And then there are quite a few, there are a few that will fall somewhere in the middle, right? Maybe not strong enough academically, but maybe not strong enough in football. And so then we have to find other opportunities for them. So sometimes it might be a local school, a local team, a vocation. But then also try and provide emotional support around that. And I think that's the part where we were not so great in the past, right? So even though we were finding pathways for you, maybe the piece about the psychology of dealing with a pathway that's not as glamorous and thinking of yourself as having failed, right? I think that's the part where we're getting better at. And so I think it's fair to say if you talk to some of our older graduates, their experience about this kind of pathway thing was not as positive as some of our more recent graduates. And we have to be humble about that. We have to accept that in order to get better, we have to understand the things that we were not so great at in the past and then improve it going forward. So that's part of a lot of our thinking right now is, as we grow and we have players come out of Egypt and Ghana and Denmark, the pyramid remains the same. So it's still going to be that same small number of players, and there's going to have more and more kids who need more opportunities, and we say we want to do that, so we have to spend time and resources on that. So that's really kind of our next level, is to find viable opportunities, but also to think of one of our manifesto points is expand the dream. Right, and the idea is, even though you have the right to dream, maybe you should expand your dream so it goes beyond a sort of very narrow, I need to play for this Liverpool, team. I need to play for that team, exactly. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I like the vision with that, and I was an athlete myself, and so, coming from the U.S., I think it's already in most scholar athletes' minds that this could pan out, or this, particularly as a woman, I was in athletics, so obviously track you could continue to go forward, but for a lot of team sports there aren't a lot of opportunities for women, so we're already in that space and learning. So so one more question about football.
Yes.
Your girls academy.
Yes. Yes.
Tell us more about that, the recruitment, how much success, like where do you see a lot of their paths leading?
So I think you just mentioned a really stark reality about the professional opportunities in team sport for women. And it's dire, and it's something that it needs to change worldwide. We have a small program. We have about 18 girls right now in our program that range between 12 and 15. And because of the lack of opportunities in football for women, most of the girls and young ladies that we get go on the school pathway. So they end up in schools in America and then look to go to university and then play in that way. So it's a program that I think we're really, really proud of, but at the same time recognize that we need to improve. And I'll tell you specifically, we need to improve the numbers, for example, right? We need to recruit more, and we need to challenge this stereotype that girls who will not play or cannot play or their parents won't let them play, right, is pervasive. And you find that, no, it's not as rampant as we think. If you go and actually spend the time and understand
they're actually
the reason,
okay with it.
right, understand the reason why. If I sit down with the parent to really explain the opportunity, then they're like, okay, why wouldn't I want something better for my daughter, right? So I think there's space for that. I think there's room for us to grow in that area. I think in the football industry, and I watched the Women's Champions League final recently, full stadium, right? When the Women's World Cup is around, full stadium. And how do we get to the point where it's not just at these one-off events,
the
right?
big stages.
The big stages, so that a woman can make a living as a man does playing football. And I don't know exactly the kind of role that Right to Dream can play in that, besides producing players who are clearly,
well, that's a start.
Superior, and then hopefully the systems that are already in place will start to grow in that way.
Well, one thing I can think of is just basically being a funnel for national teams, initially, and I think that's probably a lot of where you are anyway.
Exactly. That's exactly what we're thinking about right now.
Okay, so let's talk about who Eddie is when he's not staking his ground on Rights to Dream, going back and forth between Accra and Akosombo. Who are you? Are you a listener? Are you a watcher? Or are you a reader? And what are some of your most interesting and favorite watches, reads, or listens?
I think I am a little bit of all of that.
Okay.
I watch a lot. I watch people. I like to sit and watch.
Okay.
On the screen, on the small screen or the big screen, I'm really interested in something that would distract me from the realities.
Sure.
But has to be real. I don't know.
I get it.
It has to be realistic. So, comedies and mysteries are interesting to me. Dramas and not so much. There's enough in the world for me to deal with. So I'm usually distracting myself with some comedy. Recently, I've been watching. There's a new show called Abbott Elementary.
And
it's set in Philadelphia.
That's
and
pretty
it's like,
funny.
And it brings about all the nostalgia. And it's like I'm binging every episode, and I can't wait for the next one to come. And my wife and I actually watch it together. Because we both lived in Philadelphia, so I love that a lot. Reading wise, I'll read anything. Recently, I started reading the English version of the Quran because I'm kind of, I've never been in a space with this many Muslim students in my educational career. And all of a sudden, I find myself in that space a lot. And so I feel like I want to be able to understand a little bit more about the faith culture of our students. And we have quite a few students on campus. So I've started to, dabble in reading I can't read Arabic. Reading that just to kind of get my head around that. I'm not a great reader of nonfiction. I did that when I was younger, and now I'm more into the theoretical stuff. Which is a little like it's too nerdy. I don't remember the last time I read a book for fun, right? Just kind of it's always some sort of leadership, learning experience thing, and it's kind of sad. I need to return to that. But I feel like I'm in such work mode, somebody recommended that book. Right, let me go make sure, right?
I can give you a tip for that, and that's audiobooks. Because when you're if you're so much in that mode, if you just switch to the listen, then it becomes easier to transition into different kinds of reads.
I would do that. I'm not as tech savvy as I need to be. That's a whole lot. That's a whole other thing. But yes, I will take that tip. I'll take that tip. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you for those. We will have some links to those in our show notes and links to all of the programs and different teams that Eddie was speaking about. And so as we get to the close of our conversation, I want to ask you, what would you like to leave as a nugget of knowledge or just some final thoughts for our listeners?
I said this on another podcast, so it's not original, even though it's from me. I think every human being should wrestle with profit and purpose at some point in their life. And in profit, I'm talking about not just material profit, but like, the pleasure is doing something just for the pleasure of it and not having an impact, right? And then the purpose piece, I think, is the idea that what you're doing fulfills your soul, but also has an impact on the world. And I think whether you're a lawyer, a doctor, or a teacher, you're wrestling with both at some point and trying to find where on that spectrum you're comfortable with. And if you're too comfortable, then, the usual is try and get out of your comfort zone a little bit and shift in whatever direction. So I think it's a useful exercise, and I'm a pseudo-Christian, so there's a faith-based piece of that I think when I'm wrestling with profit and purpose, it allows me to think about how I'm more aligned with why God put me on this earth, right? And if I don't think about it, that's when I start to stray in one direction or the other. And I need that balance.
Yeah.
So I think for each person, it's a useful exercise to just kind of think about profit versus purpose, and where do you stand, where do you land on that in whatever time you're in.
Right.
I like that. That's a nice last thought, because, we're all actually, as much as we may not admit to it, we're here for the purpose, not the profit. Like, we're here to be a part of this oneness, this this whole unitary system that is this earth system. Like, we're conceiving the same dream for us to be sitting here talking to each other. So there's already this purpose that's driving us together. So thank you for that. All right, listeners, this has been another episode of the podcast. You can catch us each and every Tuesday with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com. Be sure to check out the show notes. They're always rich, and they have all the kinds of information about where to find Eddie and every guest, as well as Right to Dream. And obviously, you'll see their website, etc., etc. So until next time, folks, bye for now.